Men of Iron. Chapter 6. A boy's life is of a very flexible sort. It takes but a little while for it to shape itself to any new surroundings in which it may be thrown, to make itself new friends, to settle itself to new habits, and so it was that Miles fell directly into the ways of the lads of Devlen. On his first morning, as he washed his face and hands with the other squires and pages in a great tank of water in the armory courtyard, he presently found himself splashing and dashing with the others, laughing and shouting as loud as any, and calling some by their Christian names as though he had known them for years instead of overnight. During chapel he watched with sympathetic delight the covert pranks of the youngsters during the half-hour that Father Emmanuel droned his Latin, and with his dagger point he carved his own name among the many cut deep into the back of the bench before him. When, after breakfast, the squires poured like schoolboys into the great armory to answer to the roll call for daily exercise, he came storming in with the rest, beating the lad in front of him with his cap. Boys are very keen to feel the influence of a forceful character. A lad with a strong will is quick to reach his proper level as a greater or lesser leader among the others, and Miles was of just the masterful nature to make his individuality felt among the Devlen squires. He was quick enough to yield obedience upon all occasions to proper authority, but would never bend an inch to the usurpation of tyranny. In the school at St. Mary's Priory at Crosbydale he would submit without a murmur or offer of resistance to chastisement by old Father Ambrose, the regular teacher, but once when the fat old monk was sick and a great long-legged strapping young friar, who had temporarily taken his place, undertook to administer punishment, Miles, with a wrestling trip, flung him sprawling backward over a bench into the midst of a shoal of small boys amid a hubbub of riotous confusion. He had been flogged soundly for it under the supervision of Prior Edward himself, but so soon as his punishment was over he assured the prior very seriously that should like occasion again happen he would act in the same manner, flogging or no flogging. It was this bold, outspoken spirit that gained him at once friends and enemies at Devlen, and though it first showed itself in what was but a little matter, nevertheless it set a mark upon him that singled him out from the rest, and, although he did not suspect it at the time, called to him the attention of Sir James Lee himself, who regarded him as a lad of free and frank spirit. The first morning after the roll call in the armory, as Walter Blunt, the head bachelor, rolled up the slip of parchment, and the temporary silence burst forth into redoubled noise and confusion, each lad arming himself from a row of racks that stood along the wall, he beckoned Miles to him. "My lord himself hath spoken to Sir James Lee concerning thee," said he. "Sir James maintaineth that he will not enter thee into the body till thou hast first practised for a while at the Pells and shown what thou canst do at broadsword. Hast ever fought at the Pell?" "I," answered Miles, "and that every day of my life sin I became esquire 4 years ago, saving only Sundays and holy days." "With shield and broadsword?" "Sometimes," said Miles, "and sometimes with the short sword. Sir James would have thee come to the tilt-yard this morn. He himself will take thee in hand to try what thou canst do. Thou mayst take the arms upon yonder rack and use them until otherwise bidden. Thou sayest that the number painted above it on the wall is 17, that will be thy number for the nonce." So Miles armed himself from his rack as the others were doing from theirs. The armor was rude and heavy, used to accustom the body to the weight of the iron plates rather than for any defense. It consisted of a cuirass, or breastplate of iron, opening at the side with hinges and catching with hooks and eyes, epaulettes, or shoulder plates, arm plates and leg pieces, and a bassinet, or open-faced helmet. A great triangular shield covered with leather and studded with bosses of iron, and a heavy broadsword, pointed and dulled at the edges, completed the equipment. The practice at the Pells which Miles was bidden to attend comprised the chief exercise of the day with the esquires of young cadet soldiers of that time, and in it they learned not only all the strokes, cuts, and thrusts of swordplay then in vogue, but also toughness, endurance, and elastic quickness. The Pells themselves consisted of upright posts of ash or oak about 5 feet 6 inches in height and in girth somewhat thicker than a man's thigh. They were firmly planted in the ground, and upon them the strokes of the broadsword were directed. At Devlen the Pells stood just back of the open and covered tilting courts and the archery ranges, and thither those lads not upon household duty were marched every morning excepting Fridays and Sundays, and were there exercised under the direction of Sir James Lee and 2 assistants. The whole company was divided into 2, sometimes into 3 parties, each of which took its turn at the exercise, delivering at the word of command the various strokes, feints, attacks, and retreats as the instructors ordered. After 5 minutes of this mock battle the perspiration began to pour down the faces and the breath to come thick and short, but it was not until the lads could absolutely endure no more that the order was given to rest. and they were allowed to fling themselves panting upon the ground while another company took its place at the triple row of posts. As Miles struck and hacked at the pell assigned to him, Sir James Lee stood beside him watching him in grim silence. The lad did his best to show the knight all that he knew of uppercut, undercut, thrust, and backhand stroke, but it did not seem to him that Sir James was very well satisfied with his skill. "Thou fightest like a clodpole," said the old man. "Ha, that stroke was but ill recovered. Strike me it again, and get thou in guard more quickly." Miles repeated the stroke. "Pest," cried Sir James. "Thou art too slow by a week. Here, strike thou the blow at me." Miles hesitated. Sir James held a stout staff in his hand, but otherwise he was unarmed. "Strike, I say," said Sir James. "What stayest thou for? Art afeard?" It was Miles's answer that set the seal of individuality upon him. "Nay," said he boldly, "I am not afeard. I fear not thee nor any man." So saying, he delivered the stroke at Sir James with might and main. It was met with a jarring blow that made his wrist and arm tingle, and the next instant he received a stroke upon the bassinet that caused his ears to ring and the sparks to dance and fly before his eyes. "Pardie," said Sir James grimly, "and I had had a mace in my hand, I would have knocked thy cockerel brains out that time. Thou mayst take that blow for answering me so pertly. And now we are quits. Now strike me the stroke again, and thou art not afeard." Miles's eyes watered in spite of himself, and he shut the lids tight to wink the dimness away. Nevertheless he spoke up undauntedly as before. "Ay, marry, will I strike it again," said he, and this time he was able to recover guard quickly enough to turn Sir James's blow with his shield, instead of receiving it upon his head. "So," said Sir James, "now mind thee of this, that when thou strikest that lower cut at the legs, recover thyself more quickly. Now then strike me it at the pell." Gascoigne and other of the lads who were just then lying stretched out upon the grass beneath a tree at the edge of the open court where stood the Pells were interested spectators of the whole scene. Not one of them in their memory had heard Sir James so answered face to face as Miles had answered him, and after all, perhaps the lad himself would not have done so had he been longer a resident in the squire's quarters at Devlen. "By Our Lady, thou art a cool blade, Miles," said Gascoigne as they marched back to the armory again. "Never heard I one to speak Sir James as thou hast done this day." "And after all," said another of the young squires, "old Bruin was not so ill-pleased, methinks. That was a shrewd blow he fetched thee on the crown, Falworth. Marry, I would not have had it on my own skull for a silver penny."